Welcome to the second annual Kelly Miller Smith Foundation Symposium. We are excited to gather again this year virtually to focus on a heart-wrenching, pivotal, and solvable issue for our times: poverty versus justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system. We have two stellar partners this year. The Kelly Miller Smith Institute on Black Church Studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School is joining us again. And we are ecstatic to also partner with CEO Action for Racial Equity. We couldn't ask for two better partners. The Kelly Miller Smith Foundation was named for my father, who was a powerful voice and leader during the civil and human rights movement of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s in Tennessee and throughout the nation. He was pastor of the First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, and assistant dean of the Divinity School at Vanderbilt. However, as the late Representative John Lewis described, like Dr. King, he was committed as much to the needs of the community around him as to the disposition of the souls of the congregation. Lewis described him as an inspiration, a model, someone we all looked up to. My father's faith led him to care deeply about injustice and the many ways that it impacted Black, brown, poor, and disenfranchised people and communities. He preached, organized, and led and marched out front, but also worked behind the scenes, bringing diverse voices together to hear each other and to find solutions. That's what our symposiums are designed to do: to bring diverse voices together, to provide information and tools to take the next leg in the journey toward, in my father's words, complete freedom. Last year, candidate, now Senator Raphael Warnock, provided greetings honoring what would have been Daddy's 100th birthday. Here's what he had to say.
My friends, as pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, spiritual home of Martin Luther King Jr., I want to join you in celebrating the life and the legacy of Kelly Miller Smith. Indeed, one of the great preachers and prophets coming out of the Black church tradition in the 20th century. Dr. King is often talked about as if he were some heroic genius who sprang ex nihilo, out of nothing and out of nowhere. The truth is, for all of his genius, he was a part of a grand and noble Christian tradition. Kelly Miller Smith, too, is a product of that tradition. I'm talking about the religion of the slaves, those who weren't simply converted to Christianity, but converted Christianity itself. It was a religion born in the brush arbors of Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama. Howard Thurman, another great Morehouse man, said, by some amazing but vastly creative spirituality, the slave undertook the redemption of a religion that the master had profaned in his midst. In other words, they gave us the Bible and pointed to Ephesians, slaves, obey your masters. We took the Bible and discovered Exodus, where God told Moses to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. They gave us scraps and we made soul food. They gave us the blues and we made music. Kelly Miller Smith, one of God's great trombones, is a part of that amazing spiritual tradition. It is a religion born of suffering, a moral audacity that transcended human station. And with that audacity, he attended Morehouse College, part of a grand tradition that recalls the names of Martin Luther King Jr., Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, Howard Thurman, Benjamin Elijah Mays, so many others. And with that faith, that religion of resistance, the coupling of faith and freedom fighting, he took with him that spiritual power and moral audacity to Nashville. As a leader of the First Church, he led that Christian body into coupling its Christian witness on Sunday to engagement against powers of domination Monday through Saturday. A founder of the NCLC, an affiliate of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the organization founded and led by Martin Luther King Jr. Later, with the emergence of something called Black theology, he would be a leader of the NCBC, the National Conference of Black Christians. Kelly Miller Smith represents the best of our faith tradition, giving witness to God's vision for this world, a world imbued with love and justice for all of God's children. I join you in celebrating his 100th birthday. In 1984, his physical body passed from among us, but his spirit lives on in all those who love freedom. God bless you. Keep the faith and keep looking up.
I am Forrest Elliott Harris Sr., Professor of Ministry and Practice and Director of the Keller Miller Smith Institute on Black Church Studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School. We are pleased to again, for the second year, collaborate with the Keller Miller Smith Foundation, and this year joined with the CEO Action for Racial Equity to host the second annual Keller Miller Smith Symposium. The theme is Poverty versus Justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system. This symposium is convened with a particular interest to understand why it is more likely for Black and Latino souls to be corralled to and stuck in the criminal justice system with overwhelming difficulty escaping its clutches. We open this dialogue in this symposium with others around the country to explore transformative justice change possibilities to address this problem. As director of the Black Church Studies program named in honor of Keller Miller Smith, I am pleased today also to introduce Dr. Andre L. Churchwell, Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer for Vanderbilt University, for him to welcome and greet us for this event. Collaborating with the work of the Keller Miller Smith Institute on Black Church Studies and supporting the Keller Miller Smith Foundation, Dr. Churchwell works to extend the university's trans-institutional efforts for social justice change. Dr. Churchwell stepped down from his position as Chief Diversity Officer for Vanderbilt University Medical Center and Senior Associate Dean for Diversity Affairs at the Medical Center, which he held since 2014 to devote full-time to bringing equity, diversity, and inclusion to transformative levels of change at Vanderbilt at large. Welcome, Dr. Churchwell.
Thank you, Forrest. I really appreciate that opening. My father always told me never follow any Black ministers in a lecture or in a program. So now I understand what he meant. I want to welcome all of you to the second annual Kelly Miller Smith Symposium on Poverty versus Justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system. I am the Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer here at Vanderbilt. From my perspective, equity comes in many forms and shapes. There is health equity. And as a practicing cardiologist here at Vanderbilt, I see this every day play out in the challenges that health disparities play out for our marginalized patients in our healthcare systems throughout Nashville. There's also educational equity, which I've witnessed in my over 30 years as a diversity administrative leader. I've seen this play out in inadequate resources committed to urban and lower income schools, where most of our marginalized students perform and live. I've also seen the need to bolster and support our HBCU institutions and provide equitable support in admissions processes and practices to increase the numbers of our underrepresented minority students in our research level 1 universities. Today, though, we will confront an equally challenging and compelling equity challenge, that of justice equity. As James Forman Jr., Yale professor and son of the civil rights legend James Forman Sr. wrote in his Pulitzer Prize-winning book in 2018 called Locking Up Our Own, Crime and Punishment in Black America, a discourse on the criminal justice system here in America. He noted how a disproportionate number of young men of color are incarcerated for crimes that their white counterparts would not have been imprisoned for, or in fact would have received reduced sentences. Today, we are fortunate to have a discussion of this inequity led by Reverend Dr. Frederick R. Haynes III and Mr. Bill Underwood, a career music executive who was incarcerated for more than 30 years in 1990 for his first and only felony drug offense. Thank you all for being here. I look forward to the stimulating, thoughtful conversations ahead of us, and I welcome you again.
Thank you, Dr. Churchwell, for partnering with us, the Keller Mills Smith Institute on Black Church Studies and the Keller Mills Smith Foundation in support of this symposium. We look forward to further and future collaborations. It is my distinct honor, very distinct honor, to introduce to you Frederick Douglass Haynes. Frederick Douglass Haynes is the senior servant pastor and social justice centered and Christ-centered Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. Under his liberating faith vision for over 38 years, my beloved brother has led the Friendship West Baptist Church to become a refuge for social justice seeking people locally and globally. He has led the 12,000 Friendship West membership to work with local officials and neighborhood groups in such a way that the community has experienced a decrease in crime rate. They have organized a neighborhood association headquartered at Friendship West, where many city services have been moved to historically neglected and underserved communities. And as a result, the community continues to experience social transformation in vital areas. Broadly sought after by religious and political venues across the country, the Reverend Dr. Haynes' prophetic homiletics in the pulpit and public square is a voice that weds together Jesus and justice, social activism and witness. In 2003, Freddie Haynes, along with co-founders Dr. Ivor Carruthers and Jeremiah Wright of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, a conference that perpetuates the prophetic legacy of the late Samuel DeWitt Proctor, who during his lifetime was one of the most impactful educators and transformative agents in the academy, church, and society. And now Dr. Haynes serves as co-chair of the Board of Trustees of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, who over the last decade has been transformative and revolutionary in social justice advocacy. Dr. Haynes is a beloved friend of mine, whom I follow and whom many appreciate. He has spoken in broad and diverse ways to government, and recently, historically Black college, Paul Quinn College in South Dallas, named in his honor the International Baccalaureate School, an honor well-deserved for his local and global advocacy work in social justice. What is amazing about Freddie Haynes is his compassion, mixed with justice, a heart for the poor, oppressed, and marginalized in the world. He is an earnest, beloved brother. He has traveled to the Haitian communities in their struggles for human flourishing, to the southern border, and he is a co-marcher and prophetic voice with the Reverend Dr. William Barber's Poor People's Campaign for Economic Justice, Health Equity, a Living Wage, and Environmental Justice. We admire him. We thank God for his gifts of presence and voice, and one whom I have learned to love even deeply as he has continued to stretch himself across the country to be a voice for social justice change. I present to you now my brother and friend, Dr. Freddie Haynes.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Forrest, for your generous, even hyperbolic introduction. Of course, we all know that you are a prophetic model for each and every one of us. Your leadership is laudable, and the very fact that we are having this symposium is a reflection of the genius that God has so generously invested in you, and you have chosen as a steward of that genius to exercise it in prophetic witness. And for that, we are grateful. And of course, I think it is fitting that we are having this Kelly Miller Smith symposium today addressing poverty versus justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system. And to have with us one who I will present in a matter of moments, who has the spirit of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and that once he was emancipated from an oppressive system, he has refused to simply enjoy his own freedom, but has gone back instead, determined to dismantle a system that is downright oppressive. And so today we are discussing poverty versus justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system. Please allow me to say this moral issue is also a crisis that we find ourselves experiencing. I am a protege of Kelly Miller Smith in a vicarious fashion. I never had the chance to meet him, but through his social crisis preaching Lyman Beecher lectures that he delivered at Yale in 1983, I have been blessed in that my ministry has been profoundly formed and informed by this wonderful work. I think it's important that we hear from the man for whom this symposium is named as we look at the fact that we are in a crisis. Listen to what he says. Crisis is a transliteration of the Greek word, which means in that context, judgment, parting, estrangement, separation. Interestingly enough, Frederick Bookshell states that in the Septuagint, the term for crisis means a sense of the right, especially the right of the oppressed, which is vindicated by the judge. He goes on to cite Matthew 23:20 and Luke 11:42, pointing out that the reproach against the Pharisees was due to their indifference to the poor. What an appropriate word from 1983 that in a timeless fashion is speaking to what we are grappling with today. Poverty versus justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system, presupposes that there is something going on in the criminality of a justice system that again is criminal and in no way just. And in this criminal injustice system, we have discovered economic exploitation especially of the impoverished. And so I'm suggesting that we are in a crisis as this criminal justice system continues to operate in a way that is nothing short of criminal. It's downright unjust as it targets for both exploitation and for oppression communities of color, especially Black communities. No wonder Michelle Alexander, several years ago, arrested the attention of the nation, spotlighting the problem, saying, here's the deal. It's the new Jim Crow. It's a reflection of a caste, C-A-S-T-E system, a caste system that continues to value some and at the same time disvalue others. And the disvaluing of others is, in my words, a continuation of enslavement, which is why we have the 13th Amendment. And so the 13th Amendment has been manipulated, as it were, so that we have a criminal justice system. On the front lines of that system is a policing system. And please let me parenthetically say, let's for once and for all stop saying we've got a few bad apples as police officers. When you got all these bad apples, sooner or later, you got to deal with the fact that there's something sick with the tree. No, the orchard is sick. The system is sick. And so given that reality, you have the police system on the front lines. You have the criminality of a justice system that is fed by that policing system. And then it leads to mass incarceration, the new Jim Crow, the continuation of enslavement in these disunited states of America. Paul Butler, former prosecutor in this nation, wrote a book and entitled that book, Chokehold, in which he uses the metaphor of what has been done to too many Black people in the streets of this nation, put in the death grip of a chokehold. Eric Garner died from a chokehold. Last year, we witnessed real time George Floyd, not just a chokehold, but a knee in his neck where his breath was taken from him, both of them declaring while dying, I can't breathe. Metaphors that speak to us this day, that our communities find themselves in a chokehold, and not just a chokehold, but we find ourselves victimized by this new Jim Crow and a continuation of enslavement. And so, given that, and given the fact that in a capitalistic system, please don't miss this, follow the money. So when you see Black bodies filling up our criminal justice system that eventuates in the prisons for profit, oh, there it is, prisons for profit. You can literally get rich off of prison contracts in this capitalistic system. And so, yeah, we're talking about poverty versus justice, but guess what? There are a whole lot of folk who are being enriched at our expense. And so how appropriate it is that we have another Frederick Douglass, another Harriet Tubman, and Bill Underwood, who is coming to us in this conversation to show us the relationship between poverty and justice. As a matter of fact, right before I present him, y'all know I'm a preacher, so I can't help but quote a text. The Bible tells us that Jesus, our sable-skinned savior from the streets, Jesus, our resurrected revolutionary, who gives us our moral compass, says in the end, I'm going to judge nations. And when I judge nations, I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats. And I'm going to say I was hungry. I think I'll remix it and simply say, Jesus may well say I was hungry and you cut aid to dependent children. I was thirsty and you contaminated water in Flint, Michigan and other communities of color. I was in prison because of your criminal justice system, your predatory policing system, and your prisons for profit. And you locked me up, refusing to visit and liberate me. And then Jesus will say to this country, y'all can go to hell. Lord, when did we do this? Inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, you've also done it unto me. If we don't want this nation to go to hell, we've got to have a reckoning with this criminal justice system. We've got to have a reckoning and frame in moral terms poverty versus justice, a moral issue for our criminal justice system. With that being the case, I'm peacock proud, honeymoon happy to present Bill Underwood, senior fellow at the Sentencing Project for the Campaign to End Life Imprisonment. January of 2021, he received a compassionate release from federal prison after serving, get this, 33 years on a life sentence with 0 infractions during his over 3 decades of incarceration. And yet he became the inspiration for Booker and Bass's Second Look Act. He was recognized for his dedication and commitment to rehabilitating his life, watch this, in a system that wars against rehabilitation. Speaking of the strength of his own character, witness, and spirit. Given that, we thank God for his unwavering love and dedication to his children and grandchildren and his continuous efforts to create a culture of responsibility in his prison community despite an atmosphere of hell and hopelessness without a parole sentence. And yet, he not only was able to be emancipated because of his determination, because of his faith, and because of the fact that King would say, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, because Bill Underwood says, I'm gonna help that arc bend in the right direction. And so Bill Underwood, we thank God for you. Bill Underwood, we thank God that the spirit of Harriet Tubman, who said once she was free, it wasn't enough for her to be free. She needed to dismantle that system. Frederick Douglass said, it's not enough for me to be free. I've got to work to tell the truth, the liberating truth about a system that is immoral and downright unjust. And in 2021, we need that spirit, we need that voice. In this spirit, I present to all of us a heroic figure who we look to now for direction and wisdom, William Underwood.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I don't know what to say behind that. That's awesome.
You're awesome.
Just to reiterate what you said about the 13th Amendment, you know, how it all comes back to that, you know, and the Constitution. I was fortunate enough to get a, I don't know if it's I guess it's my burden to be granted compassion release on Martin Luther King's birthday, actually.
Wow.
You know, and that was pretty mind blowing for me. Of course, they didn't let me out. It was on Friday. And when they were telling me I had to go, you know. They came during count time. I'm straightening out my cell. I have my back turned and I hear the door click, so you turn around. And it's a unit manager. She's telling me, come on, you got to come with me. I said, where am I going? She said, you got to come. So I come out the cell. So we're walking back towards the office and she tells me, you got to go. And I said, go where? She said, you're going home. You got to go home. I said, what? I can't leave without my paperwork. I got to get my legal work. She said, no, you got to go now. You know, they have a place that they take you and drop you off it's a mall. And they drop you off in front of a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and just drop you there, and you fend for yourself from there. If your family doesn't come, whoever, or bus, whatever. So I said, no, I can't leave my legal work and my pictures. I have pictures. My mom passed in 2016, so her pictures and my kids, and over the years, my grandkids. Growing up, through the pictures, I said, I can't leave my legal work, right? So she said, but we got to get you out of here. I said, I'm not going. I'm going to the hole. I'm not leaving my legal work and my pictures, all right? So she takes me back in the back, and my case manager, one of the case managers, the guy who works on my case, right, for the facility, he was there. He's on the phone, and they're trying to locate the warden or someone in the executive capacity in the prison. The warden, associate warden. Fortunately, and I say fortunate over those days because I had been in so long by then, no one was there to sign off on it. And I told the unit manager says to the case manager, what's wrong with him? He's crazy. He don't want to go home. I said, I'm not leaving my paperwork, my legal work, and my family pictures. I'm not doing it. I'm going to the hole rather than leave my stuff. So they worked it out, and they called my family, and I got to talk to my family. And so I had to go to there was a unit, the CARES Act, under the First Step Act, and then under Attorney General Barr, the CARES Act, once they passed the provision in 2020 in light of COVID, the CARES Act, there's mandated that all prisoners, before they're released, they go to a unit for 12 days, like a quarantine unit. I had already been over there 12 days. And so, but I had to go for the weekend to leave. So it worked out. So that's why I was released on the 19th. But while we were in, I'm saying all that to get back to what you said about the 13th Amendment. And I understood while we were in, and we were listening to ENPR and looking from ourselves, watching television and the news channels, and watching the marches, because after a while, they kept us in. Besides COVID, they kept us. We couldn't even come out on the tiers for a couple of hours, or just a little fresh air in the tier outside of the cell because of what was going on in the country with the marches, and after George Floyd and the acrimony on all sides, all races, and the being in a closed environment where you have Black, Hispanic, white, Caucasians, everybody in one area, it's they don't want it. One, they've had the experience from 1995 with the crack riots, when they were voting, and God bless Sheila Jackson Lee. She tried all she could do to help, to get it 1-to-1, and it kicked off a riot around the country when they denied us, 100-to-1, staying at 100-to-1 as opposed to 1-to-1. So they learned from that. So any incident anything that's reflective of hostility, we get locked down, especially with something like that. And George Floyd reverberated around the world. So, right. They locked us down. So, but I see, and I really realize that throughout that, the youngsters, and I say the young people, they had an opportunity in a moment, because while I can understand defund the police, what it really, really is about is the constitutional amendment, amendment to the Constitution of the United States, because I went to trial and I stood on my Fifth and Sixth Amendment right, I made a Sixth Amendment challenge to the application of the federal sentencing guidelines to my case. Said, this is unconstitutional. You can't do this to me. You can't just sentence me to something. You can't indict me, arrest me, and the jury find me guilty, and they never say what I'm guilty of. And now I'm facing a life sentence. And well, because of the sentencing guidelines and the mandatory minimums, they did this. But my point is saying is I objected all the way through at trial, at sentencing. They stopped the trial and gave me a special hearing. Then in my PSI is a pre-sentence investigative report. They use a vehicle, papers to where they're going to put you at in the categories. And I made the objection because at the end of this horrific report, you can object, make your objections. Then I made my objections at sentencing. in my direct appeal, and another thing called the 2255, a habeas motion, and I have 6 cases in the law books. 3 of them I put there myself. So I learned the law. I got involved in my situation because I could only see clearly that's the only way I was ever going to get some relief. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the 5th, the right to petition the court for redress of grievances under the First Amendment, and of course we know we all recognize we have a right to peacefully assemble, and but we do not teach the children enough about the Constitution and their rights. We need a reiteration of the Constitution of the United States taught amongst our people, amongst our youth, our children, especially in light of this technology and these devices that, and everything is moving so fast, because what I missed in all of that, and this is really important, sir, that while I raised the objections under the Constitution, I really missed that, well, when they enacted or instaurated that parchment of paper, my ancestors, the people's shoulders I stand on, they were property in this country. So this don't apply to me. I mean, the first article of the United States Constitution, they still have us as property. And then forget about they eviscerated the natives, the Indians, and taught them Spanish, reinforced it with the 13th Amendment, because the police come out of the 13th Amendment, gave them the right to arrest us, gave any white man, not just the slave owner, but and empowered any white man. If you made it from the South and made it North and you were all doing all right, or just a free man and considered you, white man still had the power to grab you and capture you. Bond you and ship you back south. You know these things already, but I don't know if the people listening understand this, but I'm saying all this to say that with the amendment of the Constitution to bring in, the iteration of Black Lives Matter and human life matters and people of color matter, you see, in the Constitution, in that context, those words have to be written into that ancient parchment of paper to give us substance and meaning in this country. It really is just this, there's no other way around it. I mean, we have the economic strength. We don't have the foresight to understand, for the most part, what that economic strength, the might it gives us. But we really, really need the constitutional amendment to help us get to the other side.
Wow. That's powerful, man. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I love how you basically have said with that Constitution, which denies our humanity, we need to amend it so that constituted in this country is an appreciation for the humanity of the people whose lives have not mattered because of what James Baldwin called the big lie. The big lie is that America in its founding had to grapple with the contradiction. Okay, we are beginning a democratic experiment. We claim to be Christians, but we have enslavement of these African people. So what do we do to justify the contradiction? And that's when Baldwin says they came up with the big lie. The big lie said that Black people are not human. And as you said so well, Brother Bill, Black people are what? Property. And as property, you don't have to treat them as human beings. And James Baldwin said, that is why to this day, the big lie continues to haunt, infect, inform, and influence how we engage systems in this country. Yes, sir.
Sir, you and I both know, and I'm saying every federal employee, every state employee that operates under the Constitution in the executive capacity, That means people in prisons, people in the state prisons or in the armed forces, the marshals, the court officers, the stenographers, anybody that works for the federal government. The first thing you do is what? You raise your right hand, you put your hand on the Bible and take an oath of office. And you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. Wow. And I'm not mad at that. What I take umbrage to is the fact that in that Constitution, we are still property. And we don't get that. Right. And I can tell you, I can see what we've been fighting for. It's over 600 years now. And it all gets back to the Constitution. This Constitution, amending the Constitution. And I say right now, all of our soldiers, all of our leaders, all of our activists, all of our superstars, all of our commentators and talks, the people that we all look up to and admire. Everybody has to pick up the mantle of it. We have to amend the Constitution to take out that verbiage that subjects us. Because anybody, if I take an oath to uphold the Constitution, that means automatically I'm looking at you as property. I'm looking at you, sir, as property. Even as me as a Black man, they paying me in my 401k, I got to look at you as property because I took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Wow. And that's the reality. And even if I don't recognize that, well, I'm going to cut this brother some slack because he's got the same skin as me. Still, I got to, at some point, all that cease and desist. When the executive staff comes down and they're looking around the prison and they're looking at me and you, I got to look through you because I can't see you as an individual and a person. You, sir, are property. Right. And that's the reality. That's the reality. That's the reality. I think we have at least one marching order. I'm sure this conversation will produce more, and that is we should, out of this conversation, Kelly Miller Institute Symposium, say, hey, we've got to mobilize, organize to amend the Constitution that affirms the humanity of Black people. Because right now it's constituted where we're not. So no wonder, I'm loving that you're saying this. It's no wonder that Congress would not and has yet to deal with anything around anti-lynching. Anything. Yes, sir. Yeah. And what I meant to say about the 13th Amendment, what you so eloquently stated from the beginning. See, all these prisons is not by accident. Right. That we are removed from our communities and put in these poor white communities. Come on, man. Build them up in the prisons there. So when they do the census, say that we are not counted. I'm not counted in New York. I'm in Lee County, Virginia, which is Richmond is over here. Lee County is over here in the southwest corner of Virginia by Tennessee and Kentucky. The poorest white community in the country, one of them. They put the prisons there, and we now this community of almost 2,000 people are counted when they do the census. And this is all over the country. Right. They counted in these poor white areas, so they get more money. They get more money. And education and medicine and everything else. Right. Meanwhile, our neighborhoods are so slowly dissipating. Right. Our needs and for our people is slowly eroding. Right. Because we don't see. We can't see because rightfully so, everybody's so caught up in trying to survive and trying to, make it check to check. Yeah. So, the 13th Amendment is a vicious tool. It's a vicious tool. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But again, all this confusion gets back to the Constitution of the United States. So if we could just get some traction in that area. If we could get, we got the right to petition the court for redress of grievances. We have the right, and in that First Amendment, we have the right to assemble, free speech and march and protest. Right. We have the Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms. The Fourth Amendment, right to be free and clear from, illegal search and seizure.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth Amendment due process rights, that means everything is supposed to be applicable to you in a humane manner. And the Sixth Amendment right to jury trial and counsel. And on, you know. But these amendments under the Bill of Rights hold little weight when you get to Article 1, and that's the first article. That's not in the Bill of Rights, the first article in the Constitution.
Mr. Underwood.
Yes,
listen,
sir.
Unfortunately, we're up against the clock.
I'm sorry.
No.
You gave me the floor. Don't give me the mic.
Listen, you have been absolutely amazing. I salute you. You are a teacher now, teaching us the truth, the liberating truth you put together in a powerful way, the economics and the prison system. It's not accidental that they rob us of human resources, put those human resources, those Black people into prisons that are, you know, in these impoverished white communities, and they get resources, roads, development that we don't get in our communities. I love how you connected that. I love how you connected education. And then what got me is you kept saying, I'm not mad at this. I'm not mad at that. Your spirit is so beautiful, so powerful. And I just want to salute you and thank you. Let's give it up for the amazing.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you all for this opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from the break. Wasn't that an amazing conversation between the Reverend Dr. Haynes and Mr. Bill Underwood? Dr. Haynes said it, we are in a crisis and we need a reckoning in our criminal justice system. Wow, 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 and amen. My name is Felicia Williams. I am the former CFO of Macy's, Inc. I am currently a fellow with CEO Action for Racial Equity. CEO Action for Racial Equity is a business coalition with approximately 200 fellows from about 100 companies across multiple industries. The mission of the fellowship is to identify, develop, and promote scalable and sustainable public policies and corporate engagement strategies that will address systemic racism, social injustice, and improve societal well-being. In other words, I simply like to tell people that I get to wake up every day and work to improve the lives and circumstances of the 47+ million Black people in America. And it is by far one of the most challenging, but also one of the most rewarding jobs I've ever had. Let's get the panel discussion started. And like Dr. Haynes said, I am peacock proud and honeymoon happy to introduce today's panel. I would like to first introduce Dawn Harrington, Executive Director of Free Hearts.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Dawn Harrington. I am from Nashville, Tennessee, and I actually live in Jackson, Tennessee. And I'm the executive director of Free Hearts. Free Hearts is an organization that's led by formerly incarcerated women that provides support, education, advocacy, and organizing families impacted by incarceration. Our ultimate goals are reuniting families and strengthening communities. And so I got into this work from when I was incarcerated myself, and, very much inspired to make a difference upon my release. My brother's also formerly incarcerated, but it was definitely shocking to see, the impact firsthand on women and their families that are at home. And so definitely happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I am also very pleased to introduce Tara Coles. Tara is Policy Counsel for Civil Rights Corp. Tara, if you could also share a little bit about your background and tell us about the work of CRC.
As Felicia said, my name is Tara Coles. I am with CRC, Civil Rights Corps. And prior to joining Civil Rights Corps, I spent about 10 years as a public defender in New York City, representing parents in the family regulation system. So when they were accused of abusing or neglecting their children and having their families often ripped apart by the city. And through that work, I really got to see how this system, a white supremacist system of child separation and regulation and surveillance of Black and brown families really works in partnership with other systems like the criminal legal system. And so when I came to CRC, that's the main thing that we've been working on and that I've been able to spend a lot of time on as well. Because CRC is an organization that as a whole is dedicated to challenging systemic injustice in the United States legal system. And we know that it's a system that's built on white supremacy and economic inequality. And we work to really shift power to community-led movements, particularly those that are led by Black, brown, and poor people who are most affected by these systems. We want to help them and support them in building sufficient power to create that structural change that we feel is necessary. We engage in advocacy and public education, storytelling, and specialize in systemic civil rights litigation with the goal of changing the narrative around the legal system, as well as our culture, and bringing attention to the injustice and brutality that is a feature of our current legal system in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara. Also joining us today is Priya Sarathi Jones. Priya is the National Policy Director for Fines and Fees Justice Center. And I'm very happy to say that I work quite a bit with Priya on reforming fines and fees. Our symposium theme is Poverty versus Justice, a Moral Issue. We know that poverty is at the core of so much of the racial disparity gaps in our society. Everything from educational gaps to health gaps to obviously the wealth gap. So Priya, why don't I start with you? Can you talk to us about the intersectionality of poverty and race with imprisonment in our justice system?
These three things, race, imprisonment, and poverty, they all go together, right? So there would actually, I don't think, be a prison system at the scale at which we have a prison system if poverty was not at the level in which it exists in this country at this point. We do not have a shared understanding of US history in this country. So we all sort of think we got here or just accept that we're here and haven't given a lot of thought how we got here. Many of us are still young, that this is all we've known and this is sort of the space that we've existed in. But the truth is that this system was so deliberately put together to work exactly the way that it works right now. And many of us find ourselves surprised that it is doing what it is doing. But if you really go back and look at history and how we got here and how the prison system got so big and where did all these low-level misdemeanors really come from and what really started all of this, it directly stems from ending slavery and what did we put in place as a country when we ended slavery. And it wasn't that we flipped the switch one day and said, okay, the Civil War is over and we're all gonna live together in harmony and think and view each other as equals and human beings. That is absolutely not what happened, right? It was, the ending of slavery was forced. There was an entire war that was fought in order to end this. And the side that lost didn't just sort of accept defeat in that way. People got smarter, they got more sophisticated, and they developed systems that imprisoned people and then put them to work as a result of that imprisonment. And they made new laws like vagrancy laws and loitering laws and solicitation laws, and all kinds of things started to appear that punished primarily Black people in this country for living and existing and brought them into the criminal justice system when they did not live and exist in a way that was in accordance with the majority at the time. And so that power dynamic has always been this way. And so then there was this new system, a system that ended slavery, but people didn't get all kinds of economic opportunity when slavery was ended, similar to what Mr. Underwood said earlier. They just took us and dropped us off. It's effectively what happened after slavery was ended. People didn't have jobs. They did not have high-paying jobs, did not have education. It's not like we set people up for success. at the transition from slavery to a non-enslaved country. And so knowing that and really understanding that the 2021 version of a criminal justice system is something that has been in the making for hundreds of years. And now where we sit is it's the catch-all place. It's the place that we put everybody, that we don't want to deal with the underlying societal issues that end up, that prison is the sort of consequence of all our failures in every other space in society. It is our failure in education. It's our failure in investment in economic opportunity. It's a failure of redlining policies and all of these things that were in place that could have created wealth. It's our extraction of wealth from Black communities when they were building it on their own. It's all of that. And then saying, what we're going to do with this group of people, primarily Black people, also primarily brown people, is put them in prison, because we are not going to do the actual work it takes to lift people out of poverty, to build a country where people aren't living in poverty and destitute and having to make really tough decisions, and an over-criminalized system where now everything is illegal at this point. There's so many things that are illegal that have no business really even being government sort of including itself in the business of these things. And that entire dynamic has played out over hundreds of years. And it really wasn't until the civil rights movement where things started to turn, but that was not that long ago, right? And so it's not that, that happened 200 years ago and like, look at us now. This happened in many people's lifetimes, people who are living right now. And so the work is still to be done to disentangle where prison, race, poverty all come together. And I think the place that we start with is on the poverty side. When people are living in low economic circumstances, living in poverty, things that have been worsened during COVID, and which communities have been worsened during COVID, if we don't deal with that, then this system just gets bigger. Everything we do will just be like punish, 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 and because we don't have better solutions. And so I think that is what we are all now grappling with in 2021, is a system that has existed for hundreds of years prior to any of us even coming on the scene. And instead of us looking at that long lens and trying to figure out what the way to move forward is, we're only looking at our small piece right now and trying to just, chip away at it. And I think that's a disservice to all of the work.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for the history lesson. Thank you so much. I 100% agree with everything you're saying. And this didn't just happen. This is, as you said, intentional policies and decisions to land so many in the Black and Brown community exactly where we are today. Dawn, I do want to bring you into this conversation because you talked about women, and we know that women often bear the biggest financial burden when a loved one becomes justice involved. Can you talk to us about the impact that the criminalization of poverty has had on so many women, families, and communities?
Yes, definitely. So in 2019, in our work with, in our Free Hearts work in the state of Tennessee, we started really creating an analysis around the criminalization of poverty. And I will say, one, we, have experienced it. And to us, it's like multiple tenets in how we've experienced it. But also due to the culmination of our work, including a couple of successful campaigns. One, to pass the community-based alternatives to incarceration for primary caretakers law. And on the heels of also successfully working with Civil Rights Corps to organize 9,000 plaintiffs for the PCC campaign, and for the PCC settlement, and working with CRC also in Wilson County around driver's license suspension and revocation. We really began to develop this analysis about like how this all fits together, because we're going from the legislature where we're hearing, a bunch of rural legislators saying, our families don't, our constituents don't care about things like bail and the different things that we care about when it comes to criminalization of poverty. And then through our work with CRC, was able to go into some of these communities that, quite frankly, we would be scared to go to, definitely after sundown, and to be able to see that actually, like, the level of poverty that these constituents of our legislators are living in, and the impact of incarceration on these communities is so vast that, you know, we really were like, you know, maybe one, it can help us to develop more of an analysis, but two, it can help us to really organize ourselves and come together in order to fight back against the criminalization. And so I say that to say that we set out to do a statewide tour and a statewide survey about the criminalization of poverty. And actually, the report will be coming out in Q1, more than likely close to January. And so we're really excited to release it. And I will say the majority of the people that filled it out, the majority, the major group that filled it out are Black women that have been impacted by incarceration across the state, but there's representation across demographics. And, you know, the way we were looking at it is, and are looking at it still, is the criminalization of poverty includes things people do to survive because they are poor, but it also includes bail and pretrial detention, parole and probation, including privatized parole and probation, all of the vast number of legal financial obligations, restitution, wealth-based voting, and being prevented from voting because you can't vote. I mean, because you can't afford to pay these fees. Also, it includes, you know, driver's license suspension and revocation. And what often gets touted is, like, for example, an alternative to bail and pretrial detention, which is the criminalization of poverty, is really another form of the criminalization of poverty. And in that, I'm talking about electronic monitoring.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we began to create this analysis of, like, all of them together, and went across the state to every single jurisdiction, judicial jurisdiction, which since then we've been able to build a base in every county in our state. And, you know, to the women part of it, I think women are the fabric of our community. And, you know, we have to keep in mind that the criminalization of poverty, first of all, targets you because you are poor. And second of all, makes you more poor, you know, as a result. So it recreates itself. And, you know, we know that, you know, almost 1 in 4 unmarried mothers with children live in poverty, and that the majority of women that are incarcerated are primary caretakers. Beginning at age 5, the poverty rate is higher among women than men over the course of their lifetime. We know LGBTQ women experience higher rates of poverty than cis gender straight women and men due to the intersections of the oppression. And domestic violence and sexual violence can worsen economic standing and cause people to lose an average across the United States of 8 million days of paid work per year. And, you know, myself, I was a survivor, and, you know, the majority of women that have been incarcerated are survivors of sexual and domestic violence. And so we're already coming into this system that very deeply criminalizes poverty from already a level of being more poor, having a huge wealth wage gap, having a huge wealth gap already.
And Dawn, you mentioned a report. Will the report be available to the public, and when will it come out?
So it will be out in Q1. More than likely it'll be between January and February. And yes, It will be available to the public. So we'll definitely keep everybody. It's going to be a wonderful report.
Thank you. We definitely look forward to seeing that report. I'm sure it is going to be very, very informative. I want to talk specifically, Tara, about some of those people who have been caught up primarily because they are poor. We know that on any given day, there are almost 500,000 people sitting in jail, presumed innocent, unconvicted, awaiting trial. And Too many of these people are in jail because of an inability to pay cash bail, which could be a violation of their civil rights, as Mr. Underwood alluded to. Civil Rights Corp a few years ago won a $14 million settlement against a private probation company that was criminalizing poverty in Rutherford County, Tennessee. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about, the goal of policy when we're talking about sustained change, and how can litigation be helpful? Understanding that this group of people that we're talking about who are poor typically cannot go the litigation route, right? I mean, they don't have sufficient wealth to hire a lawyer to sue a county on their own. So maybe give us some insights on what civil rights learned through this $14 million settlement, and then what typically happens when you're trying to move policy versus litigation.
Yeah, sure. And I can start with just a little bit of background about that specific case. So we filed the lawsuit in Rutherford County back in October of 2015. So about 6 years ago this month, because this private probation company was basically extorting poor people. So the county had contracted with the company to provide probation services, but they were basically functioning as a debt collector. And they would threaten people with arrest and caging if they didn't make payments. And the county didn't even pay anything for the services, right, that they were providing. And the company made all of its money and profit from the people that it was supervising, and ended up making more money the longer people were on probation and the more they were required to pay. So this is really an example, I think, of what a lot of the speakers, including Dawn and Priya, have touched on. And this company had the ability to unilaterally decide when to seek a warrant for a violation, and then how much someone had to pay in order to avoid a violation. And it was just a really clear example of people who are poor being surveilled, controlled, and threatened with caging over money. And so fast forward to July of 2018, when our settlement was approved, the people who were on probation were compensated. I believe it was at 125% of what they paid into the company, plus money for each month that they spent enduring the supervision. But one of the most important pieces of the settlement was that it prohibited the county from contracting with a private for-profit probation company going forward. And it virtually eliminated the pre-hearing detention that they were doing, and ended the practice of placing people on probation solely for non-payment. So, it's an example of what litigation can achieve, but, it's also an example of the limits of litigation. Research shows that any form of supervised misdemeanor probation is counterproductive, it's expensive, it's harmful to people and their families. And that wasn't a goal that was going to be achieved through this litigation. That's going to come from more work, that's going to come from organizing and working with people on the ground, with groups like Dawn's, to really achieve something like that. Political change is what's going to need to shift the culture in that area, and really all over the country where that's an issue. But it's also an example of what it can achieve, because in cases like this, it's an opportunity where a county is doing something unconstitutional. There are specific things that we can do with litigation to address it, to bring it to light in a public way, and let people know what's going on, because the average person may not know about it or know what to do about it, but would be horrified, if they knew what was going on. But litigation is a tool, and it's one with clear limits. It's not going to solve everything, and litigation is unlikely to lead to the dismantling and abolishing of the white supremacist institutions that I think we're all talking about needing to be dissolved. And it requires you to work within the system and with some of these same institutions when you take the litigation approach. And it takes a long time, and people are suffering now. So it's a tool, and it's one that we use along with other tools like policy and advocacy and storytelling and narrative change, and building power within communities. But it's one that, you know, has to be guided and centered around the community being most impacted by the practices that we're talking about.
Thank you. That's very helpful. It's, you know, one of the common themes that we've been hearing from the discussion with Dr. Haynes and Mr. Underwood is this idea of understanding our constitutional rights and fighting for our constitutional rights through everything you just described, Tara. Not that everyone, again, can pursue the litigation route, but there are other means to pursue and demand our constitutional equality. You know, Dawn, CEO Action for Racial Equity, we're doing a lot of work in the pretrial equity space. And, you know, research supports the observation that we have a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent, right? So knowing this to be true, how would you respond? Because we get this question a lot when we're trying to advocate, but how would you respond to people that say pretrial equity is simply a way of letting bad people go unpunished?
So first of all, I will respond with the fact that someone is supposed to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. That's at the core, right? And I'll give an example. Like, Free Hearts has a participatory defense where we work with families that are facing the criminal legal system week after week, and we've grown it across the state. And we're part of the National Participatory Network. And through that, we've actually formed a bail fund land trust for some of our families to get our families from participatory defense released, because the local bail fund, the amounts that they have, like the majority of our participatory defense families have bails that are $250,000 and up. And, you know, my own bail was $100,000, but I mean, we see like very expensive bails. And, you know, they're supposed to be considering the family's ability to pay, but we never see that happen. Even when, you know, we put on, you know, these wonderful like bond reduction hearings where we bring in everything from the statute that, you know, they're supposed to be looking at. They're still, and the family literally gets up there and testifies about what they can and cannot pay, and then it's still not being considered. And, but one thing that we'll see, so we will get, you know, the people from our participatory defense out. We paid, you know, $500,000 for bail. We paid $200,000 bills. We paid, you know, high bails, and all of our folks get back to court, which is what, you know, it's supposedly, you know, making sure, ensuring that people get back to court. But, you know, transportation gets you back to court. With women, you know, we can't have children in the courtroom. Like, childcare gets you back to court. You know, having a community wrapped around you gets you back to court. And I think that, you know, saying that, you know, it's letting bad people go unpunished, I think at the core, first of all, it doesn't respect what we're supposed to be doing here, which is the judicial process of like letting someone have a day in court in front of their peers. And it also puts a lot of pressure on people to make plea deals, because although there's supposedly a right to a speedy trial, like we've been doing participatory defense since 2017, and some of our cases are not even concluded yet. We have people that came in and that are in our participatory defense that came in pre-trial as a child and are like 21, 22 now. So it's like, think about if somebody is coming with, okay, well, you're not gonna get out, but this will be over for you, instead of you just getting transferred back and forth to court and, you know, just sign this, or you're getting out and now you have all of these collateral consequences, just sign this deal. And so it is, I think it's, we definitely see that supposedly what's supposed to happen as far as the judicial process, as far as the bail setting process, it doesn't happen. And so, I feel like it's definitely, the thing is, if somebody, and this is what we all often try to say in court, and I'll just end it with this, like, they'll say things like, well, do you know what this person is charged with? I'm saying, well, if somebody was charged with the same thing and they had the money, they just gonna pay the money and get it. And we wouldn't even be here. Oh, that's not the issue. It is the issue. It's the issue here, because if it's a bail, amount set, whatever it is, if you have it, you're paying it and you're getting out, no problem. So when should justice be connected? Justice should never, I'll just answer that question myself, should never be connected to what class you're from, especially knowing how much our communities have been historically underdeveloped and how much the incarceration that's in our communities has continued to underdevelop our communities.
Thank you. You said that beautifully. And so many times in this pretrial equity space, we hear people make it an issue of the accused crime. And your point is 100% valid, that if you have money, if you have wealth, then you can get out. And that is exactly the point. And if you're poor, whether you're guilty or innocent, you sit and you wait. And I think that people don't understand how long it takes to have your day in court. And I tell people, I don't think I could survive in jail. And God love you, Dawn, I couldn't do it for more than a day. And before you're looking for a deal and a way out. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing the example and the story, because I think a lot of people don't understand how detrimental pretrial detention is, not only to someone's mental health and physical health, but also on their families, their job. They can lose custody of their kids and everything you said. So thank you for sharing that. Priya, we find that one of the other ways in which our justice system criminalizes poverty is through fines and fees. And you talked a little bit about it, but I'm not sure everyone could hear that what you were saying about how fines and fees make communities less safe and exacerbate poverty. So I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about the work of FFJC, what you guys are doing in poor communities of color, particularly in the different cities and states?
Yeah, and I think just so that we're all working off the same sort of understanding, fines and fees, when we say that.
Maybe you can speak a little bit louder.
So fines and fees, when we say that, and what we're talking about specifically is, anytime that you receive a citation, this could be a moving violation, this could be even parking in some places, this could be on the city level, like your grass is too tall, these ordinances that your trash can's been out on the street for 3 extra days. It can also be when you've been convicted of a crime and there are fees that are attached to that entire process. And so they show up in different ways, but including exercising your right to a jury trial. Sometimes there's a fee for that. Getting a public defender or getting counsel, a fee for that. DNA testing, which may not even be necessary in your case, a fee for that, right? And so there are all these fees that get attached on to a person's involuntary contact with the system. And that is all about generating revenue for the government. That is to cover their costs, that is to cover other priorities they've identified, that's to not increase taxes or have the conversation with, the more wealthy parts of the community that could actually pay for these things. And it is sort of to just charge those people who have touch with the system. And then we all know, who are the people who have touch with the system disproportionately? Where are people policing? What neighborhoods are they in? I don't know too many people who live in pretty affluent communities who have ever been stopped for jaywalking, who have ever been stopped for their blinker or one of their many brake lights being out. And even if they are, it's a considerate, you're not supposed to do that. Oh, your brake light is out. Go ahead and take care of that. It isn't met with, you are a criminal, you are a bad person, and my job is to now cite you, arrest you, and put you into the system. And so whenever there's this contact, we have attached money to it. We charge people, okay, you want this to go away, pay these fines and fees, and then you can go on with your day. If you have money, perhaps you're annoyed by it, you write your check and you move on, and you tell the story to somebody. I got this ticket. It's crazy. I had to pay $500 today, and I'm moving on with my day. If another person gets that same financial penalty, it could ruin their entire lives. And so that is what we're seeing happen in the space of fines and fees, is that a person, person A and person B are getting treated in some ways exactly the same, which is that you both get the same financial penalty. In other ways, it wouldn't even show up in your community. So it's not a real question to begin with, right? That's not what's happening in your community. And so what we are trying to do now is work across the country to move governments away from these policies altogether. And that work can be done on the state level by eliminating fees that they can even be charged at all. So this is something California has recently done in 2 legislative sessions, is that they have just eliminated, I think they had nearly 100 fees that show up in their system, and they have eliminated about half of those fees over 2 years, where you can't charge someone for electronic monitoring, you can't charge them for a public defender. And while it's really great, it's just a small piece of a really big thing, and it's one state versus 50 states that are participating in this. And so you need to make state level changes where states are just take away the authority, or even one step further, prohibit anybody from doing this on the local level. And then there's local work as well. And so that's what you think about with like municipal level infractions and things that are showing up on the local level, where really we need to be re-examining our codes and our laws. Why are these things on the books in the first place? There's been a lot of conversation about decriminalizing, but we say that with the caveat that decriminalizing and legalizing are not the same thing. And so decriminalizing just moves it from the criminal space, which there are advantages to, right? That you're not in the system and you're not going to have a criminal record and all of those things, but it moves it squarely into a financial penalty. And one of the issues that we are really watching and thinking through is there's a lot more awareness in the space of physical bodies being incarcerated and trying to move away from the physical incarceration of people, but not as much paying attention to the fact that you move people out of the physical state of incarceration and then incarcerate them with these types of financial burdens that they will never, ever be able to come out of, then you are just setting them on a path for both financial, mental, social ruin that they can never come out of, and all of the collateral consequences that stem from that, not being able to take care of your children, not losing your driver's license so you can't get to work. Dawn talked about what does it take to show up in court? It's transportation, it's childcare. And if I don't have a car, or I'm not legally allowed to drive, but I need to show up for this court hearing, we're just creating more and more opportunities for the criminal justice system to take people in and put them under, incarcerated state, instead of thinking, why are these things here? What really needs to be in place? And how do we set folks up for success? Even people, I really want to rebuke this narrative that there are good people and bad people, even in this world. There are just choices and things that happen. And so to just discredit people as like, you're bad, so now all the things that happen to you, you have brought on yourself, is too easy for us to give ourselves an excuse to not have to think about it and not have to do the work by putting it on somebody else's plate and saying, oh, you must have deserved this. And then only people start thinking about it when they find themselves at the other end of this system and they realize how poor it is and how unfairly it treats people. And the moment you have that touch, the moment you've been arrested, even if nothing else comes from it, all the things that stem from that arrest, from that contact, it's very hard to come back from. It's very hard to come back from. And the people who pay that price the most are low-income individuals. It's also predominantly Black women. It's Black women who are asked to carry these burdens, like they are asked to carry so many burdens in life. And it's just one more thing that if it was happening to white women, we would be having a different conversation. If it was happening to our white children, we would be having a different conversation. And our brown and Black children, our brown and Black families are worthy of the same humanity and conversation about equity and equality and existence that everyone else is worthy of.
Amen. Nothing. Yes. Thank you. Yes. All right, Tara, if you could shift gears for us after that, I'm going to ask you one of the tougher questions that we get in this space. There has been a lot of recent media coverage about increased crime and violence, and often a lot of erroneous link to bail reform legislation like Illinois, that's not even effective yet, or the bail reform in New York. How do we counter, and this is really to the theme of what is justice? So how do we counter this fear and negativity while still getting people engaged in change? And we know that folks like to use fear as a means of blocking some of the efforts that you guys have been talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, facts would be enough to counter that narrative. We know that in places that have actually implemented legislation in this area, specifically in bail reform or ending wealth-based caging of people, that they are by and large not seeing negative results. In Philadelphia, after the DA stopped seeking money bail for some misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies, there was no finding of a difference in the amount of recidivism. California's 72 largest cities declined by an average of like 7%, which was a historic low. And
can you just repeat that? Just I think people need to understand, because it is such a powerful rebuttal to the fear argument. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what you just said is so important.
Right. No, that there have been studies and people are actually looking at this, what it looked like before policies and legislation was implemented and what it looked like after. And there was a 2021 Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice report that was released that found that the rate of crime and recidivism in California's, I think, 72 largest cities declined by an average of 7%. And it's facts like those that I think that we have to keep pushing, because we know that, the people pushing that narrative are police departments, their unions, various corporate interests, people who support mass cages, period. And they want to maintain the status quo in our country. And they're not paying attention to facts, but I think it's still our responsibility to keep pushing it. Earlier this month, actually, in New York City, I know the police commissioner was forced to backtrack because he was one of those people who were putting that thought out there and that argument out there that it was the state's bail reform laws that had led to a rise in crime, and was actually forced to backtrack on that a little bit when he was actually questioned by lawmakers on that exact point. And that happens because the people on the ground keep pushing it and going back against it over and over again and not leaving any space for those kinds of arguments. Because it's something, like you said, and I think others have said already, this is historically what happens. There's always been an effort to make people fear Black people, to make people fear others. And the result of that is that people who want to continue this mass incarceration and the white supremacist systems that we have know that they can easily turn to those same arguments, not be held back by any sort of factual basis, and continue doing what's been happening in this country for so long. And so, we have to demand that there be a change in how we approach safety and really redefine what it means for a community to be safe. Because a lot of times in the conversations we're hearing, when we talk about communities feeling safe, they're not talking about communities where the people in them look like me, right? Like they're not talking about those communities. And so, there are bills that people can look at. Congresswoman Cori Bush recently introduced the People's Response Act. And that's, I think, a good example of something that we can bring attention to, because it's designed to do what we need to do more of, which is shift the paradigm and think about where we're investing for public safety. And that needs to be things outside of the carceral system and outside of the criminal legal system. Many Black people don't feel safe in this country and are not safe in this country. And so, you know, if I have to sit down and explain to my son that it's not safe for you necessarily to go up and ask a police officer any question, then that's not safe. Our community is not safe. And so, you know, we've been trying this carceral approach for a long time. It's not working. So we have to join with the advocates on the ground, the people in these communities that are pushing for reinvestments, divesting from the carceral approach and reinvesting in our communities. And I really think that at the end of the day, that's going to be what actually brings about change, because I don't know that we're ever really going to stop people like Commissioner Shea in New York City, or like the other people who continue to push this false narrative that, you know, to stop doing it. I think we're gonna have to go around them while still calling out the lies that they're telling.
That is just absolutely amazing and on point. And I'm so glad we're recording, because I need to use all of these responses in our future advocacy. I am so sorry, but unfortunately we are out of time, believe it or not. You know, I was hanging out with some girlfriends and one of them kept saying hip, and we told her that hip, nobody says that anymore. So we're trying to figure out what's the right word. And we come up with cool and lit or fire. And then someone had a teenage daughter and said that, oh, my teenage daughter is saying everything. Like that was everything. So whatever the right word, ladies, you are all awesome, hip, cool, lit, fire, everything. You are awesome panel. And we thank you for your time. We thank you for your participation. And we thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insights. I would like to transition back to Dr. Kelly Miller Smith Jr., who will share some closing remarks. Thank you all again.
Good evening, good afternoon. As I sat here and listened, I just had to say, wow, in terms of the insight and the sharing and the things that have gone on thus far. And even with all that we've heard this afternoon, this only scratches the surface of what it is that needs to be addressed and what needs to go on. It is because of the work of the persons who we've talked with today and heard from today, and that we discovered that there's a lot of work that goes on, but we're grateful for those who have advocacies, whether or not they have been engaged or involved in the criminal justice system because of the fact of their own incarcerations, or because of the fact they just have a sympathy and a compassion for people. And that is what needs to happen. I kept hearing over and over again about the fact that there needs to be some changes within political systems, changes within constitutional provisions and other kind of things. And the challenge is that so many persons have politicized so much of what goes on, particularly that have an adverse effect on people of color, and that it is a challenge. It's challenging to try to get the things passed that are going to treat everyone with the sense of humanity and the sense of decency that they ought to have. I was talking with a cousin of mine earlier today, and talking about how it is that among the things that she and her husband had done was to put things in drawers, to put things away, and that so that they're not cluttering up space and other kinds of things. And she realized that so many things that were put away in terms of her drawers and cabinets and things like that, even though the space itself looks clean. And perhaps these are the sort of things that we need to do when we're trying to keep our spaces uncluttered in our homes, in our offices, and in our businesses. But the challenge is that our political system has decided to do that with human beings, and doing it with human beings by putting them away, putting them in system, particularly those people who are people of color, and putting them away into institutions and putting them away, whether they are guilty or innocent of crimes, or just put them away because theoretically they're out of sight and out of mind. But they've also found ways to try to still penalize persons, and that they are trying to put away by having all these economic costs that come up against them as well. And even not thinking about the fact that these that they're putting away are human beings. They are mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, they're relatives, they're somebody's child that they're doing. And it is not a matter of their innocence or their guilt. It's a matter of the fact that they have so categorized persons within this nation that they felt as if we ought not to deal with them since they are not a part of the majority community. So what this symposium has done is caused us to open our eyes again, or to keep our eyes open to these sort of things. We cannot sleep on what's going on. We cannot decide that, okay, well, this is somebody else's issue, because it is not somebody else's issue. This is our issue that is affecting and causing challenges within our own community, economically, socially, politically, and otherwise as well. As we heard Mr. Underwood mention earlier, the fact that, you know, even when the census is taken, that when we find people are involved in places of incarceration, it can throw the whole census out, which means it changes the way the congressional districts are distributed and other kinds of things. And again, so all of what happens here creates challenges for this nation and for our people. We're so grateful for all persons who have spoken, who've taken time in their day to share with us. There are conversations that are going to still have to go on that are beyond what we have been able to address today. We hope that you'll reach out to these persons who we've had as a part of the panel, as well as Mr. Underwood and Dr. Haynes as well, and engage in the kind of conversations to ask yourself the question, what can I do? What do I need to do to make sure that I am on the right side of these matters, of these kinds of issues? We thank all persons who have joined us from various places across this nation. We pray God's blessings to be upon you. You will receive information in the future about other symposiums and other things that we're going to talk about that we believe will address the issues that are going on in this nation and in this world. Take care of yourselves. We hope that you have a great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next symposium.